Hi everyone, today I want to analyze a game played recently in Altibox Norway Chess round 8 between Magnus Carlsen and Yu Yangyi. It was a very instructive game because Carlsen made some weaknesses on opponent camp, pushed the game into the endgame and won in a categorical manner, showing his endgame mastery. Let's see the game. Magnus started with d4, Black replied with d5, c4, c6, and we have the Slav defense. Black doesn't want to close the diagonal of his light square bishop. Knight to f3, knight to f6, knight to c3, and black took on c4. Here white can prevent black from trying to keep his material by playing a4, but in the game he chose to play e4, and this is known as the Gambit of the Slav defense. Black continued with b5, bishop to e2, developing another piece, and next is castle. In this position, black has several ways to continue his development. He can play e6, preparing the development of his dark square bishop. He can also develop this bishop via the long diagonal by pushing g6, and another way is to develop his light square bishop to b7 or on g4, the most forward square in white camp. Instead, he played b4. Usually, moving the same piece in an opening is not a good idea. Black wanted to remove the defender of e4, but black pawns are too advanced and will become a target for white. Carlsen's reaction was to counterattack black with e5. Another way was to move the knight to a4, but after e5, black took on c3. And here we can see that black has an isolated pawn on a7 and triple pawns on the c-file. These are valid targets for white in the middle game. White took on f6, and here black has two options to take on b2 or recapture the pawn. Which is the most forcing option? Of course, taking on b2 is the most forcing because white has to react and recapture this pawn. Instead, black took on f6 and white recaptured on c3, opening the b file for his rook. Black continued with bishop to d6, developing another minor piece, and both players castled. White only minor piece that needs to be developed is the dark square bishop from c1. But from his initial position, the bishop controls many squares, and for the moment he doesn't have any good squares to go. So white continued with knight to d2. He wants to recapture the pawn with the knight, and then we'll look at d6 square. Black continued with rook to e8, bringing the least piece into the game. White played rook to e1, contesting the file. And on this square, the rook is away from any attack from the bishop when he will go to a6. Black continued with knight to d7, interposing between the queen and the bishop. And on this square, the bishop is unprotected. And now white took on c4, attacking the bishop, bishop to c7. And white continued to improve the location of his pieces, attacking the pawn from c6 with the bishop to f3, and here black didn't defend this pawn, and he counterattacked the knight from c4 with bishop to a6, knight to a3, knight to b6, bishop to a3, developing the last minor piece, and white played knight to c4. Better for black was to continue his development by moving the queen. Let's see what are the white candidate moves in this position. There is no check. We have two captures with the bishop takes on c6, knight takes on c4, and the attacking move queen to d3, double attacking the knight from c4. Also, we notice that the bishop from a6 is unprotected. So in total we have three candidate moves. So let's start with the most forcing one. Bishop takes on c6, forking both rooks. Knight takes on a3, black is a piece up, but white doesn't take the rook, and he plays an intermediate move with queen to a4, attacking the bishop and the knight. Black wins the pawn back with bishop takes on h2 check, king takes on h2, bishop to b5, bishop takes on b5, queen to b8 check, picking up the bishop with the knight. So white advantage in this position is his two connected pass pawns, which is a good stable positional advantage. So taking on c6 with the bishop is a good move. Let's see the other options with the knight takes on c4, black takes on e1, queen takes on e1, bishop takes on c4, and we have an equal position, so there is no advantage for white here. The third option, and the one played in the game, was queen to d3. Here black has a couple of options, one to take with the knight on e3, or to take on a3, or to take with the rook on a3. Let's look at the knight first moves. With the knight takes on e3, white takes on a6, knight to c2, forking the rooks, rook takes on e8 check, queen takes, bishop takes on c6, forking the queen and the rook, queen to e6, d5 attacking the queen, queen to a5, bishop takes on a8, knight takes on a1, d6 attacking the bishop, queen to b1 check, queen to f1 forcing the queen exchange, otherwise the bishop is lost. So in this position, after c4 we will have c5 and white connected pawns will win. Let's look at the second option with the knight takes on a3. Again, queen takes on a6, knight to b5, bishop takes on c6, forking the knight and the rook, knight to d6, bishop takes on 8, queen takes, and after c4 white has two connected pass pawns and an exchange, so he's winning. So this move is not working for black. In the game, black sacrificed the exchange and he took on e3 with the rook. White recaptured with the rook, knight takes, queen takes on a6, knight to c2 forking the bishop and the rook, rook to d1, knight takes on e3, queen takes on a3, and in this middle game position black weaknesses are the two isolated pawns from a7 and c6. And white should focus his attention on attacking them. White bishop is well placed on f3, looking at c6, and the rook from d1 can come to the open b file and try to infiltrate on b7. In the game, black decided to exchange queens, and Carlsen gladly accepted this since he's having a winning endgame plan. So after bishop takes on d6, we are entering the endgame, and the plan here is to attack opponent weak pawns and push our pass pawns. In this position we know black weaknesses, and white has a pawn majority in the center and he can create a pass pawn. Much stronger is to have two connected pass pawns, which is a doable thing here, and white's best move is to apply the principle of material and take on c6 with the bishop. And if the rook attacks the bishop, white can defend the bishop with d5. Usually in an endgame, first we have to take and then think. In the game, Carlsen played another move. He played c4, bishop to c8, defending the pawn, which was attacked, and the rook is very passive on this square. c5, attacking the bishop, bishop to e7, king to f1. A good move. In an endgame we need to activate our king because he's working very well with pawns. He can attack opponent pawns and in the same time help our pawns to go forward. f5. With this move black is opening the bishop diagonal, and he's trying to expand the king side. King to e2, g5, threatening to trap the bishop. White prevented this with h3, king to g7, king to d3. White king is very active. King to g6. What should white do here? The answer is simple. Continue attacking black weaknesses. We also see that the rook from d1 is not doing anything, so we need to bring it on b7 and from here attack a7, or bring it to d7, d6, attack the pawn from c6. White continue with rook to b1, h5, rook to b7, double attacking the pawn and the bishop, bishop to f6, rook to d7, g4, bishop to d1, and the bishop can go now to a4, pressuring on c6, king to g5. Black king comes into the attack, trying to generate some counterplay on the king side, but white is much faster and his central pawns are winning. After bishop to a4, f4, and here white has a choice to take on g4, and after black recapture, white will have 2 pawns on the 2nd rank and black 2 pawns on the 4th rank. And if black will try to push any pawn, black will push the other one. Black cannot progress here. Another option for white would be to continue his attack with rook to d6, but first we need to calculate and see if this option is working for him. So let's look at this move with rook to d6, f3, h4. This is the most forcing move with check, king takes on h4, g3 check, king to h3. Black will bring his king to g2 and try to take this pawn and then promote his pawn. But let's see if black is able to do this. After rook takes on f6, taking the free bishop, king to g2, king to e3, rook to e8, but the c6 pawn remains unprotected. We have a check, king to f4, king takes on f2, bishop takes on c6, and white will pick up all black pawns. So rook to d6 is working fine for white. In the game, Carlsen played instead another move, f3, and black tried to cut white king to reach the e-file with rook to e8, but the drawback of this move is that c6 is unprotected. White continue with f takes on g4, h takes, rook to e6, defending the pawn. White does the same with bishop to d1, rook to e3 check, king to c4, a5. This is a mistake because the side that defends should be careful with pushing the pawns. Bishop to f3, defending both pawns and also looking at c6. His 2 connected pass pawns after c6 will fall will win the game. In the game he tried rook to a3, white took the material and he has 2 connected pass pawns, so he is winning. Rook takes on e2, and this pawn cannot queen because white king is very close. So now we see how important it is to have our king activated. White continue with bishop to e4, making room for the c pawn to go forward. White started to apply the 2nd correct plan in an endgame, the one to push his pass pawns, a4, c6, rook to a1, making room for the pawn to go forward, and also the rook will try to give some checks. But white continued his plan and pushed c7. There is only 1 square until this pawn will reach c8 and promote to a new queen. a3, this is a blunder. It's not preventing white plan to push his pawn, but of course first white needs to move his king. After king to b3, black resigned. His position is hopeless. For example, if he tries rook to c1, rook to d5 check, king takes on g4, rook to c5, black has to exchange and white will promote to a queen. So this was the game played between Magnus Carlsen and Yangyi, where Carlsen showed his superiority in the endgame. If you found this video useful, click on the like button, share this video, watch other games from my channel, and leave some comments and suggestions in the comment section. See you next time. Bye.